All right, welcome everyone. We're Semblance of Sanity. I'm Caleb.
I'm Jacob.
And we're here, of course, for podcast number 27. Yes. And we're talking about tips for new writers.
Yes.
Yeah, those of you that are aspiring writers and you wish to start
in
storytelling, be it whatever medium you want, movies, TV shows, books, anime, comics, what have you, it doesn't matter. We're here to give you some tips that can maybe help streamline the beginning bit of the process for you.
All those things that we wish we had someone tell us, 5-10 years ago.
Yeah, that would have been really awesome, because there's a lot of things in writing that when people say, I'm writing this, what they generally mean is they want to write this. And there's a lot of things that, people feel that there are hurdles that are holding them back from writing. And hopefully what we're going to do is remove a lot of those hurdles for you so that you can just get to doing what you love to do, which is writing.
Yep.
So with that being said, Jacob, we've got 10 things on the list.
We do.
How about we kick it off with the first one?
Yes. So this one is one of those ones that really can't be stressed enough. Write quickly, not well. That's how I would summarize this, because there are so many people I know, like Caleb said, that want to write or whatever, or they have been working on some story for 10 years, but they're nowhere near getting it finished, and they probably never will. It's one of those things where a ton of people set out to write stories, but very few people actually finish them. And if you think about it, you actually improve the most when you're just writing to write and just get a lot of stuff done, and you're not worrying about the details of fine-tuning your craft or whatever, because you'll probably have to do 5 or 6 drafts anyways before it's ready.
Yes, and one of the things that people tend to do, especially when they're new, inexperienced writers in the beginning, is they think of themselves as a writer and an editor in the beginning, which you are not.
Yeah,
you are a writer.
Yep.
You will write the whole first draft and finish the story before you do any editing, if you want to do this right. And I think we can segue into the next one here. We'll do mine as the third one here. Start with small stories and actually finish them.
Yes.
This is tied into something that we mentioned previously in the first bit here, but don't start with something Game of Thrones level, where you're wanting to write some 1200 page epic fantasy.
Because there's this thing called exhaustion with the story, where you get tired of it and you want to just move on. A lot of times what happens is you move on when it's not yet finished.
Yep.
It never ends up getting finished.
Yeah, and then that ends up building a track record in your mind of,
I
don't finish stories, so therefore I must not be a good writer. Yeah. Which, trust me, every writer goes through this cycle, but until they break the cycle and just decide, I'm going to write a small story, like 5 pages, or 10 pages or whatever, write it, finish it. Finishing it, again, does not mean editing it. That means finishing the first draft.
Yeah, because there's a lot of things that people, like when I went through and I finally had finished a book, I was like, wow, okay, I got the first draft and it was absolute crap. And then when I went to go do the next story, the first draft of it, I was way better. But by the time I got to the second draft, it was this new experience, a bunch of things that I knew nothing about because I'd never gotten to this point before. So making sure that you actually go through the steps and you see it to completion is a really big deal.
Yeah. I think I'm going to just shunt mine down to way later and stuff. Let's keep going with the next one here. This one's very important in terms of structure, because you need a dedicated workspace.
Yeah.
And this is huge.
This is huge regardless of whether you're doing storytelling or just life in general.
Anything. Yeah. If you're going to be working on a project and it's you are the only person working on this project, you especially need a dedicated space.
Right.
And this space cannot be impinged upon by anyone. I don't care how close they are to you. This is your workspace.
Exactly.
You dedicate this space towards that project, in this case writing, but also dedicate a specific allotment of time, it doesn't matter how long it is, for specifically writing and nothing else.
Right.
And this has been huge for you recently, Jacob.
Yes, it really has been. Like think about it, okay, if you're wanting to do writing or storytelling or whatever you're doing seriously, it's something that could potentially be a career or at least a side gig to get some money or whatever, think about it like a job. And when you have a job, you go into work, and hopefully, you don't do anything else while you're there, right?
Yeah.
And then you go home, and at that point, you're not thinking about the work anymore. You're done with that. A lot of times what used to happen with me is that I wouldn't do that, so what would happen is I wouldn't be very effective when I would sit down to write, And then whenever I would be doing other stuff, I would always be down on myself because I'd be like, I could be writing right now. I could be writing right now. As opposed to if you say, okay, I'm going to set out to do this much in a day, and then you go and you do that like first thing, then the whole rest of the day's free, and you can actually unwind and keep yourself in a place physically, emotionally, mentally, where you can continue to do that, because the consistency is what wins out in the end.
Absolutely. And following up with this, if you think, well, I think about writing a lot when I'm not at my workspace, carry an idea notebook.
Right.
You don't have to have a physical notebook, but the idea is you have something to capture your ideas. And when I say capture, I mean like the minute you have the idea,
scribble
boom,
it down.
You scribble it down.
This is actually something that I forgot to point out for the whole starting small stories and finishing them. One of the biggest issues that I would have when I would write is I would come up with this great idea for a story. I would start writing it, and then I'd get some new shinier idea, and I would go over to that one. This is where this comes in handy.
You just dump them all into it.
You can just dump the idea into a notepad. That way, you're not
getting distracted.
You're not getting distracted and ignoring what you're actually working on, but you're not losing out on the awesome idea either. You can come back to it later.
You as a writer, if you are dedicating a portion of your time to this, you will have like 20 ideas a day. And
you will not run out of ideas.
All of them are worth putting in the notebook. I don't care how bad you think they are. So that's a good thing to do as well. And also tying into short stories, this is something that I think Jacob could particularly talk about, but I like how it applies, because writing small one-sentence stories is probably a next kind of iteration of helping you capture a story in that small portion. But
well, and I wouldn't even say it's necessarily something to do just as a practice, but the idea is that just about any story should be able to be summed up in one sentence.
Gotcha.
Because if it's not able to be summed up in one sentence, then there will be this sense of like, where's the direction of the story, right? It'll feel kind of chaotic.
Right.
Where when you have those really simple stories, like think like A Silent Voice, or My Hero Academia or whatever, there's some kind of way that you can condense it down to one sentence and be like, this is what the story's about. A boy learns what it means to be a hero. A bully tries to find redemption for the deaf girl that he harassed. Things like that. That way, whenever something happens in the story, people will know, okay, and you will know, does this belong?
Right. Good stuff. Good stuff. This one is something I think needs a lot of clarification.
Yes.
Whenever you're starting about writing, you're usually alone. Most people who are writers end up kind of in their space of writing, and they're just enclosed in a bubble, and and they're just writing and stuff. I guess nowadays it's this, but it is good to have a writing group.
Yes,
and
it is super important.
And to clarify, this is some things that Jacob and I have found that make good writing groups versus not good writing groups. Good writing groups are encouragers and more or less accountability groups, rather than editors to help you with your story.
Right. They can do that sometimes, but the thing is, you want to make sure that the people that are offering you edits know what they're doing, because there's with editing, there's three different kinds of edits usually. There's substantive editing, where it's like, okay, what is actually happening in the story, right? Plot points, things like that. Then there's the copy editing, which is like, all right, let's figure out how to communicate it a bit better on like sentence structure and things like that. And then there's the proofreading, which is make sure
just
there's no typos
and stuff.
A lot of times people will try and give substantive edits when they really shouldn't be. So they'll say like, hey, this slice of life rom-com, you should add some dragons to it and spaceships. That will really spice it up.
And while that might seem obvious, one of the ways that I just keep it simple is whenever I'm a part of a writing group, I do not bring my writing project into the group until I've been meeting with them for maybe like 12 to 15 times. Like, I want to be...
I might not agree with... Like, I don't do that myself, but that communicates it very
but what I found is the discourse ends up encouraging you to keep the writing thing on your mind and very present. And also, a lot of people just need community around the thing that they're passionate about. So seeking out that community is more important ultimately than them making your story better. Just in the grand scheme of things. Because writing can be lonely. Just being
absolutely.
real there.
Yeah,
It's a very lonely thing sometimes.
Any kind of like creative endeavor like can be super lonely because you're the one that's believing in it, not everybody else. You have to make them believe in it, and that means you have to keep yourself motivated and on task, which is really hard, like stupidly hard. So
if anything, I wouldn't even try to do that. I would just get a schedule and be as disciplined with it as possible,
even if the people,
and not try to psych yourself up with it.
Even if the people aren't like particularly gifted with the area that you're working in, whether it's like writing or drawing or whatever you're doing, having someone there that is an accountability partner where you actually report to them, especially if you're going somewhere physically like different, right?
Yes.
At a certain time, okay, here we meet, and this is when your work is due. So yeah, those things can be very helpful, but you want to make sure that they're not editing the story that they wish it was, but they're actually helping you bring out the most of what your story can be.
Right, and this is one that I'm going to bring up. I was going to use first, but this sounds like a good time to bring it up. Whenever you're writing, one of the things that people always ask me is, which part of the story do you start with first? Like, which part should I start with first? And I think that there's no right answer to this, but I'm just going to give you the thing that's...
There's a bunch of different ways to do it.
Exactly. I'm just going to give you the thing that's worked the best for me is my building up of confidence to write stories started out with just writing a ton of crappy characters. I mean, a ton. I would write about 10 characters a day. And they have no context. They have no story that's built around them. They basically could be inserted into any story potentially because one of the things that I found was there are these templates online. In fact, Jacob helped me find one of them where you basically have a little questionnaire for your character, and then once you've answered as many of those as you can, you have a character essentially. But just writing those became fun to the point where I needed a story to give them context too.
Yeah.
So if you just are comfortable writing a ton of characters, which in my opinion are the most important aspect of a story, I think you would agree with that.
Like the three main aspects of a story are like I got this from a Brandon Sanderson lecture, but it's character, world, and plot.
Right.
And world is just really setting.
World is setting. Yes.
And a lot of times people will focus a lot on the plot or the setting and not really the characters. And the characters are what make it really unique. Because, say like a murder mystery novel or movie or something like that. They're all kind of the same as far as plot goes.
There can
be slight variations and stuff.
And even those variations have probably been done.
But when it comes to the characters, those can completely go around to any story, and those can be something unique. When you feel like, I know that person. That character isn't a character. It is a person.
Right.
That's when it really just stands out and becomes something you remember.
So characters.
Yes.
Just focus on that at the beginning, if nothing else.
Right.
So when they're talking about like having, little short stories and stuff, just write a one-page biography that tells their backstory. That's a character right there. I mean, that's also a story right there.
And that's one of the things that can be very encouraging because I know for me, I hate the idea of having work go to waste.
Yes.
So when people would tell me like, okay, your first several drafts are not going to be very good.
Right.
It's okay.
Yeah.
I'd be like, but I spent so much work on those. It's not that big of a deal because it will help the characters get better because writing in general is a skill. It is a craft. It's not something that you can just do and your book is automatically perfect because you did it once, right? You have to get better and better at it. You got to do the grind. You got to keep making those iron daggers, to get your smithing skill up to 100.
Okay, Mr. Skyrim.
But like you have to do those sorts of things. So treat it like a video game where you have to max out your character.
Yeah. Yeah, so you have a 10,000 character limit for your inventory. Max it out.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Max it out.
Yep, because even if the writing isn't something that ends up being in the finished product, it will still be something that will improve the rest of your writing by making you better.
Yes.
So
this is one that I think also ties in well with the character bit, is do not get attached too much to your individual ideas or individual stories.
Right, and that can be characters.
And that can be characters too. Yeah. That's why I ended up making tons of characters, was I was stuck in a mold of getting too attached to my main character or my main antagonist or something. But when I stopped being attached to it by making just a crap ton of them, like, 100 in a week or something like that, people be like, oh, so are any of those characters any good? I'm like, I don't care.
I'll find out later.
Maybe I'll find out later.
Yeah,
add context to them. So if you're willing to just generate ideas and keep recording those things that are little moments of inspiration, what you'll find is when you go back and focus on one of those things again and give it some time, it can become something more than it was initially. Therefore, don't get attached to any of them. I mean, if you're already working on a project now and you've made a goal, finish that.
Yeah.
But that also is a way to keep from getting distracted and focus on the new shiny thing, because you're not attached to those other characters yet. They're not a part of your main project.
Right. One of the things that, I talked about how I had the problem of always jumping from story idea to story idea, and never finishing anything.
Yeah,
and that is a very serious issue, and I would say it's a more important issue than this one, because if you don't finish anything, then you haven't finished anything.
Absolutely.
But a lot of the times, for a long time myself, and I've seen this for other people as well, they'll have that story that they came up with a long time ago, right?
Ooh,
and they've been working on it for a long time, and it's kind of like when you play World of Warcraft long enough that you're like, you know what, I love World of Warcraft, even though it's not the best game, and there are probably better ones, but I've spent so much time on it, I love it. I'm in love with it.
It blinds you to what it actually is.
Right, because the idea is that if you do decide to put down a story, that's fine. Just stick with the news story or whatever. Don't make a habit of doing that. And because sometimes that story you came up with 8 years ago is just not that great a story idea. You could come up with a much better one if you did one now.
Yeah. That's why I'm of the opinion that you write short stories primarily, because you're going to be finished with that short story in 2 weeks to a month anyway. As long as you're consistently writing, you'll find that you don't have time to hit the lull stage where you're like, I'm slogging through this really long story and I want something new and shiny. No, it doesn't matter. Your stories are so short. You never run into that problem.
Yeah. It's like the idea that if you came up with some initial concept for a story, right?
Yeah.
And then maybe over the years you've refined all the specific instances and scenes and things like that, and characters and stuff.
Definitely.
But still, the original idea, the premise, the foundation that you're building it on wasn't that great. Then sometimes, and again, don't do this a lot because you want to stick to a story and finish it, but sometimes you need to just throw it away.
And usually if it's been taking you all that time to make the story, it's because it's too big of a story, and also it's your first story.
Exactly.
And primarily, your first story should be able to be done in under a year.
Something that the Brandon Sanderson lectures. By the way, Brandon Sanderson, he's this epic fantasy writer. He's really, really good. I haven't actually read any of his works yet because they're super huge.
But you can go watch all the lectures on YouTube.
Yeah, he does some classes, and they are amazing. And one of the things that he said is that if you want to be professional in the sort of writing industry, you want to be cranking out a book a year. Now, that does not mean that has to be one that gets published. And if you end up doing something that's epic fantasy, that might take longer. But that's one of the reasons why it's important to start small.
Yes.
Because if you think about it, a show, Attack on Titan, Season 2, took 4 years to come out, right? How many people sort of forgot about Attack on Titan by the time the second season came around, right? So,
Not me.
Well, I didn't either, but it's it just wasn't quite the same,
right?
But yeah.
And then the final bit here, this one's very important. It cannot be understated. Stay positive.
Yeah.
Celebrate your victories and enjoy the process.
Exactly.
One of the things with writing that it is it's ultimately a grind.
Yep.
Think about it like a video game MMO. You're gonna grind for XP. You're gonna grind for those sentences. You're gonna grind for those chapters. Everything is a little milestone towards a bigger milestone, towards a bigger can't talk right now. But you get the idea.
Yeah.
One of the things that writers can often get into ruts with is self-criticism. Staying positive, oh man, is huge for writing. And by following the previous tips that we mentioned here, it will make this 10th tip easier.
Right.
But the thing is that you really need to do all of the previous ones with specifically involving keeping everything focused and simple. Otherwise, falling into that rut of self-criticism is very, very easy.
Yes. this is a process. Success is not where you are right now.
Yes.
It's the daily steps you're taking to get somewhere.
Yep.
So if you don't have 3 books, published and all that stuff, that does not mean you're a failure.
Right.
Right?
Right.
If you are taking the daily steps, but you don't have anything published yet, that is success.
Yes.
That is awesome.
And you need to celebrate those victories. And the easiest way to have victories is to set goals. And one of the things that was hard for me in the beginning was setting easy goals. Easy goals does not mean bad goals or dumb goals. Set SMART goals. Look up SMART goals. It's a form of
it's an acronym for that kind of thing, and it's very helpful.
And then when you have those moments where you actually do the work, you are consistent, you go a week of waking up on time and doing that little bit of writing that you dedicated in your workspace time to do, you're like, yeah, I did it. I did my writing. That's a victory.
You won.
Because one of the things that will happen with writing over time is you'll develop habits. Right. And then habits infer lifestyle, and lifestyle infers your actions.
Right. You do not write a book in a day. Yes. You write it over the course of a year by being consistent.
365 days.
Exactly.
Yes.
Right.
And that doesn't mean necessarily writing 8 hours a day.
Right.
That just means finding your pace, sticking with it.
Yep.
And then when you've achieved enough victories to where you can increase that, you do that.
Exactly.
So it's a process. And staying positive, I think, ties in pretty well with the writing group bit. If you're in a writing group that's bringing you down, get out. Like, that's... I would just say that in life in general. If you're in a social situation where you're taking efforts to stay positive and you're being dragged down, just leave.
Yeah, a lot of these things actually could be pretty much like you could
apply to
substitute
almost any
writing
area of
with
life.
just about anything else. Yeah,
Jacob and Caleb.
And also, when you're giving feedback on stories, be positive. Right?
Ooh, yes.
There is no such thing as the perfect story.
You focus on what you.
Yeah, what you focus on, you find.
Thank you, Jacob.
And if you're critiquing somebody's story and they're actually wanting like feedback and stuff, just because they're in the same writing group as you does not mean they have spent as much time on writing as you. Right? So don't think that you're like better than them or anything because your story's better right now. That probably just means you've been doing this longer.
Right.
So, give them grace. Find the good stuff, because most people have something good in a story. Even like in the bad stories out there, there's usually some sort of kernel where you can say, oh, that was good. The stuff around it needed to be cleaned up or removed or whatever, but they had something there.
Yeah. So. And we'll summarize these 10 tips in like a pinned comment at the end of the video. But guys, take those 10 to heart. If you find like, hey, I don't like number 6 or something, that's fine.
That's fine. But everyone has the different way of doing it.
If anything, you'll find that at least, I would say 3 of these are something that every single writer is going to tell you if you ask for advice.
And really, if I were to sum up the one that I would say is the most important, it's the first one. Write quickly. Write quickly. Don't worry about it being well. You'll get better as you write more. Whatever speed you start using right now is probably going to be your speed moving forward, potentially for the rest of your life. So choose what it's going to be.
Right.
But
you're a painter. You got to build the foundation first.
Exactly. Yeah. I thought of a literal foundation, and I was like, you're a painter. Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, we're going to get into some questions that were asked from last week. I love you, Little Duck. You are always here asking questions, and I appreciate them. They're very well thought out. First question is from Little Duck. It's question time. I love animals in stories, especially the animal companion trope. Describe your perfect animal companion. It can be realistic or fantastical as you want. Anything goes. Well, that's not a question, but I love the opportunity for us to kind of share what we would think of as a perfect animal companion. Well, I'm a huge fan of Airbender. I really love anything that is big and I can squeeze. Like basically anything like Sully from Monsters, Inc.
Gotcha.
And I think that there's something that should be a good theme in the animal companion trope, where the animal companion fulfills a functional role for the group, the main protagonist kind of group in the story. But there's an emotional attachment that is different to so the protagonist has an emotional connection to the animal companion that is completely different from the others. And Aang's connection with Appa in Avatar: The Last Airbender is a perfect example of this. So much so that when people think about what are the 5 moments where you cried in Avatar: The Last Airbender, Appa's Lost Days is almost in everyone's like top 5. It might not be the number one, but it's like, oh my gosh, like they made that character an animal companion, like a character, and it's pretty impressive. But yeah, I want something big that I can squeeze.
For me, I'm a bit more simple with this.
Yeah.
So, for me personally, I would want either a dragon or a direwolf. I'm not sure which one. But I'm serious. Like,
Jacob wants to conquer the world.
George R.R. Martin's decision to have all the Stark kids get direwolves was fantastic. One of the best decisions he could have made, like, for the story.
Yes.
Because one, they're basically dogs, right?
Yep.
Who doesn't want a dog?
Yep.
But these dogs are attack dogs that are big enough to ride, that also, kind of give psychic powers. So
yeah. What's not to like?
What's not to like? And then dragons are dragons, right? Who wouldn't want a dragon?
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what would be
great stuff, man. William San asks, how can I manage more than one protagonist without losing focus?
That is an
excellent question.
It's hard.
It's one of the things that I have to give props anytime someone sets up things with generally it's a dual protagonist type setup, or they go for the ensemble cast where there is no true main character, and I think that's less ambitious than a dual main character setup, because if you make them both truly the main protagonist, like they're both main protagonists, that's harder than basically kind of muddling the waters with everyone.
Yeah,
I think Game of Thrones is a good example of how to manage it. It's you basically make everyone personal, and the way you keep it from losing focus is you just make sure with your writing style you have a way to consistently bounce back between them.
Well,
but what's some thoughts that you have on that?
So with Game of Thrones, right? Usually when you have a lot of protagonists that are truly like equal protagonists, it'll be in some kind of epic fantasy or something like that.
Yeah.
Because it takes a lot of time. That's the real problem that you end up having with multiple protagonists.
Yeah.
Is that you basically have multiple stories.
Yeah.
And with Game of Thrones, one of the things that it does so well is it has these multiple protagonists, but they are so far spread out that the books don't have to worry about retreading any of the same ground.
Yes.
What Arya is doing in one area has little to no bearing on what Dany is doing across the sea.
Yeah.
Right?
Very
true. And because they have so much real estate to work with as far as like pages or, episode length or whatever, they can do that. Yeah. If you have something like a dual main character, I think that's why you think it's more ambitious, is because then you have to make sure that, because when you have dual main characters, the stories are usually related somehow.
Yep.
Kind of like Suzaku and Lelouch.
Or Hunter Hunter.
Or Hunter Hunter. But even then, with something like Hunter Hunter, you've got a clear main character. Gone.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
In Code Geass, you have a clear, character that is more of a main character than the other.
No, he's clearly the main character.
Yeah, he's clearly the main character.
That's why I think that most of these dual main protagonist kind of setups aren't actually dual main protagonists.
Right, exactly.
They make you think that they are, but they're not. One of the things I think you can do, and it's not wrong to settle for this, is do that. Is you have one that's clearly a little bit more main character protagonist than the other one. The other one's kind of an attaché to the main protagonist.
Sure.
But if you want to keep it from losing focus, I think you need to make the stories synergistic and intertwined.
Exactly.
Brothers is a great way to do this in general, because the familial connection means they're going to be closer together. One of the things that I really liked about the show Vikings, I don't know how much you got into this, but
about 3 seasons.
The main character Ragnar has a brother, Rollo. And the way that they blend the two of them as main characters along the way is done quite well, but it does lose focus.
Yep.
So I think that this question is almost a catch-22. You're going to lose some focus, but you can make up for it by an excellent execution of the multiple protagonists.
I would say there's absolutely a way to make it not lose focus. One of the best examples I can give is when this happens in like romance type stories, because that's where it usually happens and it is done really well. And the reason I would say it's done very well is because they keep the characters spatially in the same location. So they have two people moving the story forward, two protagonists, but they don't have to worry about, splitting the story off into different areas. If you look at something like Spice and Wolf, Torador, or, it happens actually a lot in romance stories where they
Right.
because ideally you want the characters to be, equally liked and equally driving the story.
Yeah, I think Torador is a decent example of that, but one of the things that's tricky in a lot of romance stories is you don't get the internal dialogue of both of them.
Right.
You usually get it of just one of them.
Yeah, and that's something that lends itself a lot better to like a TV show or something than
Yes.
a book series.
Yes.
I will say in the book I'm writing, I have 6 protagonists. And the way
Show off.
and the way I still have like a person that's the main character, for the most part. The perspective is from their point of view and all that stuff.
Right.
But the way I do it is I make it so that it's like, oh, they're in a squad together.
Mm-hmm.
So that way it makes sense for them to all be in the same areas, most of the time, doing the same things and, and having conflict over the same things.
Yeah.
But yeah, so...
Yeah, find some way to bring your protagonist into a unit of sorts to where their stories synergize well together.
Exactly.
Summer Looney asks, what do you guys think about leaving points in stories unclarified, like a special event, anomaly, or circumstance?
Absolutely.
One of the elements of mystery that's so compelling is you have a story that leaves questions in the middle to get the reader into a certain frame of mind.
Yes, and it can also be a great way to have the reader still be asking questions after the story's over.
Yes.
Because then they're essentially still experiencing the story even when they're not experiencing the story.
Yep.
And that is amazing. When that happens, like there have been stories that have blown my mind for months afterwards because I can't stop thinking about them because there's things that are ambiguous and left up to the imagination and you have to fill in the blanks, and it just every time you look at it you put something different in the blank and it's just amazing.
Right. And one of the things that's important to make, I would say, important about this is that be careful when you do this around the endings. I would say it's actually more impactful to do this with themes. If you do this with hard plot points, people will get a little bit upset that there's not as much clarity or conclusion or finality to the story's general story and plot.
Yeah.
But if you do this with themes, one of the things I really liked about the original Matrix was how well it blended the themes and these somewhat unclarified little plot point events that melded the theme with the story, or the themes, plural, with the story. I've rarely found a movie that generated more discussion for me than the first Matrix, just over my lifetime.
Sure, it's a great one.
Yeah. And it's not even that great of a story if you think about it.
No, it's one of those one-sentence story things.
Yes.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, next question from Wile E. Coyote. Multiple questions.
Yes.
1, you have finished the first 4 arcs of Hunter x Hunter. The Hunter Exam, the Zoldyck Family, Heaven's Arena, and York New City. How would you rate every arc? Oh, that's a good question. I would say we probably have a pretty similar top. Let's rate them 1 to 4 in terms of the favorite. York New City is number 1.
Number 1, obviously.
So now this question I think is a little bit tricky because in terms of number 2, there's one in here that's really short,
right?
And that's the Zoldyck family, and I don't even remember where that begun. They were just suddenly done with the Hunter Exam,
and then they're like, "Let's go get
Killua."
Yeah. So that one I would say can probably go last. Just
that could
because
go last.
Yeah.
Because it has the least amount of content, and there was a lot of things that happened in it that artificially slowed down the story. But when they finally got onto the estate, things got pretty good.
Yeah.
So overall, I'd say all of these arcs were fine. The York New one was clearly the best one.
Yeah, the York New one is something special.
But the tricky thing about the Hunter Exam and Heaven's Arena is there's different parts within them that I liked way more than others.
Yeah, because the Hunter Exam was much longer than Heaven's Arena.
Much longer.
And there were a lot of slower episodes in the beginning. But then there were like
the island.
Yeah, but then there was the island, and there was the weird tournament thing that they did, like all that stuff, and those things were just incredible. Yeah. So it's like, how do you balance those?
Yeah, and I think that the way they introduced a lot of the new characters in the Hunter Exam needs to be given props.
Yes.
So if anything,
so that's where I would probably have it edge out over the.
Yeah, I would say it's a very close and like near tie. But I would say the Hunter exam barely beats Heaven's Arena, even though Heaven's Arena, I would say,
had the Nen and all
had
that
the
stuff.
Nen, and it was a little bit more efficient.
Yes.
The things that the Hunter exam tackled were far-reaching. And they were also they utilized a bunch of clever foreshadowing in the Hunter exam to lead into things that would be explained in arcs like Heaven's Arena.
And the other thing I would say that is something that the Hunter exam had, like, on a lot of the other arcs, even moving forward, is that since it was the first arc, they needed to make sure that they established, like, with some strong, like, concrete stuff, who these people are, who these characters are. And since they're the main cast, that's something that I'm way more, like, interested in finding out about than, say, side characters. Not side characters aren't, like, awesome, but because it's the main characters in particular, and because they did a really good job of setting them up in that first arc, it just edges out.
Oh, another good
out of
4 question.
I know.
Number 2, out of the 4 antagonists you've seen in JoJo so far, the Pillarmen, the 3 Pillarmen, and Dio, which one is your favorite? Well, not AC/DC.
No, not AC/DC.
I would say Wham is probably still the highest.
Yeah.
Because Dio, the problem with Dio, Dio is very close. But the thing is that we're coming into part 3. Part 3.
Yeah.
And Dio's back. And holy crap. Like
and the thing is that, like, because of where we're at now, I think that's the main reason why it would be Wham over Dio. Because if you look at the first arc and the amount of time that Dio was in there, the moments that he were there, he totally stole the spotlight. But the amount of, like, actual, like, footage, like, minutes of screen time that we got with him, wasn't that much.
And also his character was quite one-dimensional in the beginning, I would say.
Yeah, he totally owned it and, like, did it to the extreme, but he was very, like, simple.
Yeah, and yet Wham had at least a couple dimensions to him that I would say edges him out over Dio just barely.
Yeah.
But he honestly might be tied with Dio in terms of charisma. Like the presence that they have. Like Wham has got some presence, man.
He does.
It's awesome.
And okay, here's something I will say. I could see us being a little bit biased towards Wham because all the awesome moments with Wham also had Joseph.
Yes,
whereas
that's true.
Dio's awesome moments had Jonathan. So
I feel in a way, the antagonist and protagonist provide a yin-yang relationship that does influence the other quite a bit. So I would say Wham for now, Dio second, probably Cars next,
third, and then
AC/DC last. Yeah. Screw that guy. I hate him. Okay, which one is your favorite? I like part 2 more, but I always felt like Dio in part 1 was levels above the part 2 antagonist with only Wham coming close. Yeah, you're right along the same threads we are. We would just give Wham a little bit more credit. This next question is from Jacob Germana McCrae. When it comes to TV show / anime, how do you feel about art styles doing the literary cross-up compared to their story?
Like Madoka Magica and Made in Abyss with their cute styles, but the story being quite the opposite.
Oh.
So, I love it when this happens. It doesn't have to be with art styles, like, specifically.
Yeah.
But I love it when stories, like, set up expectations and then subvert them in ways that they've built up to, so you're not completely, like, it's not something that's jarring, you know? You know it's coming, but you don't really know it's coming.
Yeah, stories need to deftly handle this because there's a couple stories out there that do hard about faces on the story's direction with no build up. And you can't credit that. You can't give credit to that.
Right. Because the whole idea is that you're supposed to, you want to have your story attract the audience that will enjoy it.
Right.
So if it's specifically set to attract a particular audience and then without, like, basically doing something to keep the ones that want the changes that are about to happen, it ends up being this thing where you kind of, like, lose because the people that would really enjoy your story don't end up watching it or reading it, and the people that read it or watch it don't end up liking it because they wanted something different.
Yeah. Great question, though. Next question's from Erwin Smith. What's your favorite anime? Whoa, and which anime do you guys regret watching? Let's do the regret one first, because I think mine technically technically is harder to find than yours because you've watched more bad anime.
But that makes it harder for me, doesn't it?
No, that makes it easier because for me, I have to choose things that actually kind of shaped the way I look at anime. So I would say Bleach.
Okay, I do not regret Bleach at all. I would not rewatch it, but I do not regret it.
The reason why I regret Bleach is not because of the story being bad or that it was too long or anything. It was that I watched Bleach and I didn't watch anything else for a long time afterwards because I didn't really appreciate how led on I was for a lackluster story in and of itself. It was the first anime I watched, and I could have done better at that time. And that's just life, though. You usually experience the lesser version of something early on because you're not necessarily ready for the good stuff coming next.
I feel like for the anime that I would regret watching, it needs to be something that I actually remember. And most of the bad anime I've seen just don't really leave an impression. So I don't.
Yeah, you can't just say Claymore or something like that.
Well, actually, I was thinking of saying
that. I can read his mind.
But I don't know. So because this is how I would basically sum it up. I will be happy that I watched a story, even if it was not a good show.
Right.
If it's one of those things where I look back on it and I'm like, I don't have any takeaways from that. I don't have any nuggets to get from that. Mm-hmm. Personally, I don't think, say, Mirai Nikki is the most well-written story out there, but it has two specific things, one song and one character that I really liked.
Okay.
So I'm like, okay, I don't regret watching that show. But yeah, it'd probably end up being something like Claymore. Or
I can read his mind.
Yeah. Or, there was another one. Kaichou wa Maid-sama.
That's not the whole Dragon Maid thing.
No. Right? No, it was this one that came out in 2011 or 2012 or something. Okay. And it was one of those ones where I wanted a good rom-com anime, and it could have been potentially an okay one, but it didn't. Wasn't. But it ended up just not ending. And I was just like, oh, okay, so I watched that, but nothing really happened.
Yeah, I'm not going to say Sword Art Online because, I want to rag on, a story.
Get those
because I would say that I don't really regret many of the anime I watch in general because I don't really watch bad, really bad anime. But, I would say it would be a tough choice. But as for favorite anime, this is crazy. Because how can we actually pick? Well, I've already said that my favorite anime isn't technically an anime. It's Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Yeah.
So that's the easy answer. That's not really the answer you're looking for.
Right.
But here, I'm gonna say something. This is probably the most anime I've watched, and I will recommend it to everyone, and I can rewatch it with tons of value. And it's also got a great dub and sub. Is Steins Gate. I would say that I really like Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood, but one of the things about Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood is I feel like it's a bit tame. It's a bit of a longer story as well.
It doesn't do all the things that anime can do.
But also I feel like Steins Gate is a story that will stand the test of time. That's pun intended. Very much.
I wonder why it will.
Yeah. No, but I think that Steins Gate as a story brings something that, while it has its flaws and stuff, is something truly unique that will change the way you look at stories and anime, I think.
This is something that I can't really I can't decide because there's so many good ones. I will say that for the longest time my top 3 were Toradora, Haruhi, and Black Lagoon, but those I don't really want to say those.
He's abandoned that.
Here is the one that I would say I can't say it's my favorite because who can say their favorite anime?
I know.
But
really.
That's a big but. This is the one that has just been destroying me recently. It's one of those ones that the more I think about it, the more I love it. And it's not a show, it's a movie. It's called A Silent Voice.
Oh, yeah.
Now, I don't know whether I like it more than Wolf Children, because Wolf Children is my favorite movie. But I might. I don't know.
Yeah. A Silent Voice. Watch
it if you haven't.
It is say no more.
So good.
Say no more.
It is
we hear you, dude. All right, final question from Error Anonimo. How would you subvert the rival trope?
Ooh.
Whoa.
There are a ton of like ways
there's a ton of ways that you can do it.
But like, what would we do?
The way I would do it is I really like the rivals that don't like end up like, you know, just becoming friends and everything afterwards. But I like the rival trope where they love each other and they hate that they love each other. So basically, they are constantly being pulled together and pushing themselves apart from each other. So the rival trope is subverted in that their goals are completely like antagonistic towards each other.
Okay.
But because they love each other, there's almost this like, I don't think this is a functional relationship to like,
but it makes for an entertaining
for an entertaining story because I'm trying to think of stories that have actually done this effectively or at all, and I think that it's very hard to write. So if I was going to like perfectly subvert it, I would induce a love-hate relationship with each other in there with the two rivals and have it go almost borderline antagonistic, but because they love each other, they can't actually, you know, it's like they can't actually kill each other. They can't actually, you know, cause real harm to the other. It's this Here's
what I would do. Here's what I would do. I would go for something along the lines of almost like a Greek tragedy.
Okay.
Where it's not that they're competing.
They both die.
No, not something like that.
Classic.
No. Because the greatest tragedy is not the things that do happen, it's the things that could have happened. Yeah,
right.
But don't. Mm-hmm. So I would have it be something where there are two people and set up something, whether it's like a romance or like a familial connection or something like that, where if only they could get along, it would be this amazing thing. And in a lot of ways, they want the same things, you know, for that whole rival aspect. But they have some fundamental difference in their beliefs, right? That makes them oil and water.
But that's like every rival.
No. But the thing is that it would not be about the way I would do the story is it would be a tonal shift on the rivals themselves. So it wouldn't be about them competing with each other in that sense of like a rival.
Right.
It would be the can they get along? So like a couple people that like are on like opposite ends of like the Civil War or something, or you know, like
it's Romeo and Juliet basically.
Yeah, that kind of a thing.
But I think that one actually can be done pretty well if you utilize the different identity, not actually the different ideology. If you do it from the standpoint of like Beauty and the Beast kind of stuff, where it's like there's no grid for these two to actually find a way to work it out, and there's a little bit of a tension between there, but actually have it where they, you know, by fate keeps pushing them back together.
No, except I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't want to do it like that.
You wouldn't do it like that?
I would want to make it so that it's that they could resolve their differences.
But they don't?
But they don't. They choose not to because they're stubborn, because whatever.
But that still sounds like Naruto and Sasuke.
No.
Yeah, okay. I'm not getting it.
Not to rag on Naruto and Sasuke or anything like that, but the idea is that it wouldn't be about conflict between the characters themselves in that traditional sense. And I don't know if this is really subverting the trope, since it's more of I'd be going for more of a tonal shift. But the idea that it's just the two friends that, you know, can't get along, they or whatever, you know, something along those lines.
I think you should focus on the tragedy bit, because that shows how it's going to end. One of the things with rivals is it usually ends badly for one and well for the other, or it ends good for both of them. I think having it end badly for both of them is a great way to subvert the trope. That makes it Greek tragedy. They could have had a great, you know, thing happen, but instead they didn't because of their dumb choices.
Here's how I could do it. I could make it so that they're estranged for some reason, estranged parents, siblings, you know, whatever. Yeah. Some sort of relationship there that's broken, right? Mm-hmm. And they need to basically resolve things, and they keep putting it off. Mm-hmm. And then by the time one of them is willing to actually try and fix things, the other person has died. Or, you know, or moved to another country, or, you know, whatever, something to the point where too late.
Okay. That'd be interesting. I'd be curious to see how you wrote that. Oh, guys, we actually needed to bring up our Patreon of the week. We have Unknown Eidolon, one of our VIP patrons. Dude, you're fantastic. You're one of the
so awesome.
one of the original supporters of us back in August. And we appreciate you and everything you do, man.
We really do.
It's huge to have people like you who are supporting us in this manner. So, yes. All right, guys. We'll see you again in the next one. But before that, make sure to leave your questions in the comments down below
for the next
so
podcast.
We can get into those in the next one. And also let us know kind of your thoughts. If you're a writer, what are some tips that you think other people in the comments would need to hear? Because, we're all in our process right now.
Exactly.
And we are all, like, taking little steps here and there. And, as a community, we can come together and band around the idea of stories because we all just find that, it hits us somewhere.
Who hasn't, thought they wanted to make their own anime at some point or something
people
like
that don't watch anime.
Well,
but anyways, guys. All right, it's been a lot of fun, and we'll see you in the next one. But until then, we're Semblance of Sanity. I'm Caleb.
I'm Jacob.
And we'll see you all next time.